We want to welcome everybody in, and we want everyone to meet Mr. Dean Rolando, who is based in Chicago. And we're so excited to have him coming down to work with our young musicians September of 2026 for our Great American Songbook Edition 2026, which is our 11th event by that moniker. So everybody, welcome Dean Rolando.
Hello.
So we want to hear about your upbringing, Dean. Where are you from?
I'm from Chicago. I grew up in the uptown neighborhood of Chicago. My father was a musician, a very fine musician, great saxophone player and woodwind doubler. Was on the NBC staff orchestra, played shows. I mean, a lot of recording. Uh, and the uptown area at the time in the 50s and 60s was a very kind of an artsy area. A lot of entertainers, people like George Hal Linden, all sorts of different people who you saw in Barney Miller, but he really was a clarinetist and a vocalist in the big bands. I mean, a lot of these people were floating around that. Doris Day,
Mhm.
not when I was young, but she was in the neighborhood in the 40s. But I was, my dad was a musician. My mom eventually was a dental hygienist, and my dad said, "Well, you should play an instrument." Maybe not for a living, but he said he started me on piano when I was 5 years old. So I was 5 years old when I started taking lessons. And I'm not a poster child for like the devout practicer. I mean, uh, I had a wonderful teacher who was the music director for a very nice Lutheran church, which had good music. And she was very global. She wasn't just, I mean, I played a lot of classical music, but and a lot of it by ear. but but she kind of like set me on the right path technically, uh, and didn't make it a job. So I never felt like quitting. So I just went, and you lose interest a little bit here and there, when you're in grammar school. But then I always liked Broadway musicals, and West Side Story would come out, and you'd want to learn that song. You want to learn this song from My Fair Lady. And my dad had a wonderful record collection, um, all jazz almost. And although he listened to everything later, but we had a lot of Oscar Peterson and Bill Evans and Miles, and so I listened to those records. I mean, particularly Oscar Peterson, people say you have some Oscar Peterson in you. I said about this much, because you can only have this much Oscar Peterson in you. But um, so I just kind of played, and um, then I came into. Tell me if you're getting bored here. But
Oh,
around
no, we
eighth
want
grade,
to
I
know
just
all the things.
well, I mean, the thing about piano is you sit in front of it,
Yeah.
and if you're going to be a competition level classical pianist, you're going to be sitting in front of it for 7 hours a day, and that was not in my spirit. And I learned a lot of things by ear, you know, uh, especially pop tunes that would come up, and um, so I wasn't very always dependent on the written note, although you have to be able to read some written notes to be in this business. But
Mhm.
but I was never like the reader that would, you know, sight read, some impossible thing for a jingle or something. But so around eighth grade, just before I graduated, I wanted to play a band instrument, because I wanted to be in the band in high school. And you can't do that in the piano. So I asked my dad, and he said, "Well, you're going to play trumpet because I don't want you looking for a reed for the rest of your life." And so that's exactly what he said. So he got me a nice old ambassador trumpet, used, good instrument. Bought me the book. Said, "Okay, here, put it together, put it up to your lips. This is how you do it. Teach yourself to play. You can read music." So I taught myself to play trumpet over the summer, and then I
Wow.
got in band in high school, and actually got into the top band the second week I was there. And so then trumpet became a big deal. And I never stopped playing piano, but I trumpet became actually more time consuming, because trumpet is time consuming.
Mm,
You really have to practice a lot to turn
mhm.
corners on trumpet. And but I enjoyed it a lot, and I joined a drum and bugle corps, and did that for 4 years. And then there was tons of bands in the late '60s and early '70s, and a lot of them were horn bands. So I was in a band called the United Nations, and from about my junior year in high school all the way through college. We made a pretty decent living playing gigs, 9-piece band. So I would play trumpet, and then we had an organ player, but he wasn't real good. So if it was something hard on organ, I would play.
Oh,
So,
wow.
but he was a good singer, so he would go out front, and so it all worked out. And so basically, what happened was I came out of college, got a degree in secondary ed because they gave you an extra year of college, a 2S deferment, because there was a war on at that time. So they gave you an extra year if you wanted to get an ed degree. I was in a performance. I would have been out earlier with my performance degree. So I had a great time student teaching in high school, but I and never taught after that. So I came out and things had changed, and all of a sudden there was a lot more work on keyboards and piano than on trumpet. And also trumpet is in order to really, really, really get, it's a 4-hour day job. And
Hmm.
that, even then, there's no guarantees. It's extremely uh, demanding instrument. And piano, not so much. I mean, I mean, because I'd been playing it for so long.
Right.
So I played in bands, not jazz bands, played in bands, but like I always kind of had a thing for jazz because I'd listened to so much because I never had any jazz formal training. But and then out of the blue, one day, there's a wonderful, and Tom knows, Judy Roberts. You know Judy Roberts? Do you remember Judy
I
Roberts
know
here in
the name,
Chicago?
yes.
Yeah,
Hmm.
phenomenal talent, great jazz pianist and singer. And her, we lived upstairs from her sister. And I'd only met Judy on the periphery a few times, but she came over with her boyfriend, Tom Mitter. And Tom had gone to the Playboy Club gig. And Tom's telling Judy's sister, well, I need a piano player. There's no, I lost a guy who's going to do it. And Rosie says, well, the guy upstairs plays piano. So he came upstairs and went out and got his saxophone and came in and said, let's play some tunes. We did. And so then all of a sudden I was a jazz player. so, um,
Wow.
so I mean, really, I got my jazz training. I mean, I knew a lot of standard songs just from association, but that wasn't how I made a living until about 1981. And so then but we were working 5 nights at the Playboy Club, 4 sets a night, just playing jazz standards, and it was a lot of fun, and nobody bugging you really,
Yeah.
and a lot of good people sitting in. And then Laurel popped into the picture, and she met Judy, and Judy introduced her to Tom, and
Mhm.
she wanted to put a band together, and Tom said, "Well, we'll do it." So that's how I ended up with Laurel, and for
Wow.
the next whatever
How,
10,
what a
12.
blessing to be able to be, you just were, born into this wonderful city that had all of these opportunities for you, and then you were able just to continue on and, make your career there.
Well, a lot of careers are a lot of things. There's some work. There's a lot of luck involved, and being at the right place at the right time, and being in a place where you can make a living in music. You know, um, so I mean, I was fortunate. Although my dad he never pushed me into the business. He in fact probably didn't want me to be in the business, but he didn't dissuade me. He just
Mhm.
said, "Oh, that's good. That's nice." And uh, the only time we worked at a gig. We were in two different bands at the same hotel one night, so that was kind of funny.
Did he
And
ever
he was
give
with
you any advice
not
professionally,
about
musically, or
not so much musical advice. I mean, one thing he always said is you got to be early. You got to be dependable. And then when I was being more of a, I don't know, maybe I was in college and I was playing piano and I had to transpose something, and he goes, well, you got to learn to play intervallically. So what he meant was, you have to think in terms of intervals and hear intervals. Don't think in terms of notes and saying, oh, I got to go up a third so that C now I'm in E. No, you got to think interval. intervallically. So, but he never. Once in a while, he would sit down. He could play piano, and if I was trying to learn a tune and I wasn't getting the change right, he'd come out of his bedroom and just play it for me. And so, but I never. He never. He was not a helicopter parent. Let's put it that way. Uh, whatever the opposite of that is, I was a mistake. So my brother and sister are 10 and 12 years older than me. So really, when I was growing up, my dad was working nights and my mom worked for a crazy dentist that worked till 10 o'clock at night, 4 nights a week. So I was basically on my own from about third grade on. I
Oh
mean,
my gosh.
I used to eat in this one diner or there was a Chinese place. Right? My friends were all envious because I could go, I ate in restaurants for 4 or 5 nights, which is good training for if you're a musician because, you eat in restaurants a lot.
So,
But, uh, but yeah, so I mean, I was lucky to be in the environment and I was lucky, you know, one thing we have to be careful with as somebody my age, so many times older musicians say to younger players, "Oh, there's no work. The business is nothing like it used to be. La da 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 da. The sky is gray. For young musicians, young artists, the sky is blue. They're gonna make their
mhm,
own universe.
mhm,
They may not be in the same universe I was, but they'll find a way if they really want to do it to make their way in the business. Do this. You maybe do some teaching. You do whatever, but you put it all together and you can have a very fulfilled life in the music business. I mean, again, it takes a little bit of luck and chutzpah, but I think I try to encourage young players. One thing I do advise them, we mentioned AI, right? And I had a lot of friends. I did quite a few commercials in the 80s. It was a very big time in Chicago, in the 80s, 90s for doing McDonald's and those kind of commercials. And a lot of my friends, and quite a few, they dedicated their whole thing to that. And what happened was that business went away, and none of them could play a song all the way through. I mean, they didn't know any songs. And
wow.
I always, I always was, you know, somebody who could play songs, and so I would tell young players is the last thing that AI is going to get is live playing. People are going to want to see live performance. So make sure that you can do a live performance. You can do a whole song.
Mhm,
You can,
mhm,
you don't, you can go, you don't need to use Pro Tools and everything. You can actually go and grab a mic like we're going to do with your people and sing a song, and hopefully I play the song, same song.
mhm, mhm, mhm,
So, it's really important to keep in mind that that's the last thing that's going to go, and it'll never go. People are always going to want to see it. They're not going to want to watch AI do the Mahler 3. you know. So,
mm,
um,
mm,
so
mm,
that's kind of one advice that I tend to have, for young players and middle-aged players, as a matter of fact.
mhm,
So
mhm.
so that's have I answered any of your questions? I'm not sure.
No, you're good. You're good. Did you ever have the itch to leave Chicago and go to New York? Because most people where they grow up, they're like, oh, well, I want to, experience something different.
No. Um, I never had that itch. I lived in LA for 6 months because I was touring with an artist that we had to be based in LA.
Hmm.
And so I didn't like LA. I mean, I liked the weather, particularly because we was from November until May or something like that. But um, I didn't. Los Angeles to me seemed like kind of unwieldy and it's too spread out, and you know, it depends what niche you get into there. But it was surprising to me that a lot of the players were not well rounded. I guess I would say. Now, I'm not generalizing with all LA players, but my impression was, and maybe that was just the ones that I interacted with. I mean, because there are many that play great, the film scoring people and all that. But that's a whole different. Uh, if you get into that, you have to have ice water in your veins because you don't want to be the person that has the loud instrument that makes the mistake on the last part of the you know of whatever section you're doing. So
Hmm.
um, So I lived in LA, came back to Chicago, never had an urge to go. I love New York and was there. And then Laurel and I were there an awful lot. But it's one thing to go to New York and have a week at the Blue Note or Bottom Line or NU Jazz Festival. It's another thing to try to live in New York and scuffle and make a living. And I was married in 1975, and we didn't have any children yet, but we had started having children in '84. But it's I think it would be many people do it, but it'd be a very difficult place to raise children,
Mhm.
and uh, it's just too nuts.
Mhm.
Chicago is like a kind of a really nice medium. Uh, there was a good music scene, a community, and a lot of opportunities, and there still are. And so I just never had that urge to go to New York. I had friends that did, um, and some of them were successful, and some came back with their tail between their legs. You know what I mean? But three or four have done very well, but only one of them is married. So,
Yeah, that makes it rough. That makes it rough.
life, you're basically in a boat on a river, and sometimes there's some rapids, and sometimes there's smooth sailing, and once in a while you find a nice harbor. And I mean, there's so much. I mean, what is it? A friend of mine used to say, "Al- always expect the unexpected and fear nothing." So, uh, Tom Mitter used to say that, and that's kind of the truth. Is you always have to be aware of, like, okay, well, this is an opportunity. This is not an opportunity, but you have to take some chances sometimes. But there's nothing wrong with having a steady job and having a some stability in your life. I mean, I was a straight freelancer, um, period, until, I mean, that only made my living, playing music totally, until 2002. So I got married in '75, and so I played a lot of notes to
Mhm.
to make a living. And but there was a lot. I mean, I was literally working. I was working 330 dates a year, something like that, plus some jingles and commercials and recording sessions for other artists other than Laurel. Um, but so you put it all together, and that's your living. But then the union thing came up, so that made me be able to be a little bit more selective about what I
Mhm.
did.
Mhm.
But still, I could go out of town. We do actually with the City Lights Orchestra, who I work with. In the past, we've done a lot of our work has been out of town, large corporate events like McDonald's shows, and it's given us a chance to work with some great artists. So, like one time, well, a lot of times David Foster would be like the main guy who would bring people in, and so but he'd bring young talent. And one time he brought in young Michael Bublé, and
How about
this is
that?
back, I don't know how many years ago. And we got a big orchestra, 45-piece orchestra. So we got his charts. We do his tune. We finished the tune. He turns around. He says, I've never sang in front of an orchestra. This is unbelievable. I mean, it was the first time he'd sang in front of a real orchestra. And so it's kind of fun. We had Garth Brooks come in one time. He came in just by himself, and he comes on stage. He gets his guitar out, and he was having trouble with it. So he hands it to our great guitar player, Bob Palmieri, who has perfect pitch. He says, "Can you help me with this?" Bobby takes the guitar, and he starts tuning it. And Garth goes, "Where's your tuner?" And Bobby goes, and he tuned it, gave it back to him, and away we went. Really, really unassuming. So I've been fortunate to work with, some really good people and a lot of big, well, not only corporate shows. We've done quite a few things at the Auditorium Theater here in Ravinia.
Mhm.
It's just a sideman piano player. I mean, that's, you know, you're just one of the 45, except there's only one of you. There's,
Mhm.
22 strings. So, so,
Oh,
so they can
wow.
hide a little bit. You can't hide on piano so much.
So were there any times, kind of going back just a little bit, when you were kind of coming out of your student phase into the professional world? Were there things that when, from your training that you felt like really equipped you to handle the professional world? And was there anything that, learning curves that you had when you came into the profession where you thought, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to really have to go home and woodshed this because this is like out of my realm. I've got this opportunity to play this type of music and it's foreign to me.
Oh, yeah. I mean, some things I was pretty well equipped to play. I mean, if it was like in, something that involved just paying attention and hearing things, I was pretty well equipped for that. Technically, I'm pretty well equipped, but yeah, we've some of the McDonald's shows we had some very difficult. They would do their own McDonald's Idol, and they get 12,000 participants, and they would pick 12. And then David Foster would come in and work with them, and then the orchestra would play the show with them. And some of the music was a little bit beyond what I normally would be comfortable with. So yeah, I had to woodshed some things. It was never like impossible, but it was like I wouldn't want to sight read it. I mean, that would
Mhm.
have been a disaster. So sometimes you have to do that. Um, I have a lot of respect for people who are really great sight readers, and I have several friends here in Chicago that are that. And they're also great ear players. I mean, they have the whole thing. My strength is my ear playing and I guess my jazz playing. I don't know, but yeah, I probably should have paid a little more attention to that. But when you're young and the teacher plays a piece and it's easier for you to kind of copy what they do. You get away with that for a while,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
then you hit a wall. So then when you
Yeah.
get into the early Beethoven sonatinas, and of course then in college you're tackling some Beethoven sonatas, like Patatique or something. Then that's some real deal stuff. And I played that stuff. I would grade myself what's one step above poorly. So you could recognize it.
Right.
Tom would recognize it. You would recognize it and say, yeah, not so much.
Yeah.
But I mean, just tackling that kind of repertoire, it makes you a better player.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I never thought in terms of I got to really do this to be ready for that. Um, it all sort of just kind of, most of my playing has been experiential and not practiced. Does that
Mhm.
make sense?
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
mean, I was playing so much um, for so many years that you're playing 4 or 5 hours a night, so you're gonna you're gonna learn from your mistakes, and generally, unless you're in a recording session, nobody's gonna shoot you, usually. I mean,
Mhm.
if you blow a change on some tune or something, but
Mhm.
um, I never went through like the now in jazz studies, there's so many schools that have jazz programs. There was very few jazz programs in the '60s. You had Berkeley didn't really exist yet, so you had North Texas State, Illinois, and Indiana were the three that really existed. And there was David Baker in Indiana. I mean, but a lot of students now, I mean, there's all these programs and there's a methodology to teaching jazz, which sometimes makes a lot of players sound sort of similar,
Mhm.
because they learn like, okay, this mode, you do this and you do this and you
Yeah.
play David Baker, da, 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 da. I mean, and, and so I never had that because I never had that. I never transcribed anything. Uh, I just listened. I listened to a lot of jazz stuff, and I figured, well, that's what it's supposed to sound like, you know. And so that's kind of was my approach to improvisation was um, my ear tells me that you listen to a lot of records, and that's your musical universe, and you kind of pick and choose and put it together
Mhm.
like a
Mhm.
jigsaw puzzle. That's how I
Mhm.
sort of see it. So I was never a huge fan of a rigid, jazz education uh, program. Uh, and I'm just talking about jazz because we're going to be doing,
Mhm.
many different styles of song.
Mhm.
It's not only going to be jazz; it can be, whatever. Um, but I think it's the best of times for that and the worst of times. So,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, um, so I like a more of a organic grassroots approach to improvisation than one that's been studied, you know,
Mhm.
so much.
Was there ever a time where you were intimidated?
Punching above your weight. Um, yeah, I've had that experience. I think everybody except a rare few have had the experience of like wondering, am I in over my head here?
Hmm.
But generally, I've, I've never really ex had a really, I've had a few bad experiences, um, but I can honestly say that in most cases of them, it wasn't on me only, it was the people that we were working with, um, were incompetent. They didn't know, they didn't have a conductor that knew what was going on. And,
Hmm.
so you get into that situation sometimes where, the drummer's the conductor and, and they give you, you have these medleys. A lot of times the
Hmm.
Borscht Belt people were like
Hmm.
this. They
Hmm.
have these medleys of 32 songs. In the piano book, you have a page turn every, 16 bars or
Yeah.
something, and then they have arrows. Oh
Hmm.
no, we cut to here, and that's 2 pages away. And then, so during the rehearsal, the drummer's saying, watch out here. She's going to drop. She's going to go to the wrong place here. I mean, and so I've had experiences where you're just trying to use your ears and hold on. I mean, it's never
Right.
been a total disaster, but near disasters. But for the most part, like a really good artist, um, yeah, I'll use Laurel as an example. Uh, we would oftentimes pick up rhythm sections, a bass player and a drummer, in a town. And most of the time, you everybody played fine. And she never would ever, but if we had somebody that wasn't fine, she never vibed anybody and she would always accommodate them. Like one time we had a drummer, I can't remember, Syracuse, New York, I'm thinking, and he gave himself the gig. He kind of booked the gig, but he gave himself, and he was, he really couldn't play very well. So we have some stuff that moves along pretty fast,
Yeah.
um, and so she would say, "Oh, no, you know what? Dean and I do this as a duo." And then she would figure out what they could do well, like a shuffle. And,
Hmm.
okay, we'll do doodling, we'll do stuff, and she would pattern her show on what they could do to not look bad.
Yeah.
And then if there was something she wanted to do that was harder, we would just do it as a duo. And I never saw her, you know, give anybody a bad vibe, and that's to me, I mean, particularly, you know, I've worked with a lot of singers in my life, and some of them will give you a bad vibe.
Yeah.
So not you, but uh, so I would say that, the better, the more talented people are, the less they do that. You
Mhm.
know, these like Kelly Clarkson, unbelievable. Just she could be playing with anybody, and she'd just be okay. It's all good.
Mhm.
Yeah. So,
Mhm. Wow.
and so I mean, yeah, I've never. If I don't, I never took. Well, let me preface this by saying I'm very careful about what gigs I would take, though. So I'm not going to take a job that I know I am not suited for.
Mhm.
I mean, I would get a call for a jingle and say, well, we want to do this part of the Goldberg variations or something for this. No, no, not me. I'll give you the guys or girls who can do. I mean, or playing with, like doing an all Sondheim show with all. I mean, I've done Sondheim shows,
Yeah.
but sometimes those can get crazy.
Mhm.
Laurel was doing. I said, Laurel, I don't want to do any of that. So I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
um, anyone could whistle. I love some of his tunes, but yeah, I would not take a gig where the reading was super deep. I
Yeah.
really wouldn't do it. So you have to know, you have to be honest with yourself, and if you'll save yourself some. Sometimes you can't because something is foisted on you, like you're playing like some of the things. But if I have a choice, I try to err on the side of caution. She came into town, and her father actually lived in Barrington, which is a suburb, very nice suburb. But she had a little bit of money, so she got an apartment, I think, around Rush Street, and I know that's where it was. And so she decided to go out and hear people. And the first one I think she heard was Judy Roberts, who was playing at the Back Room, which was a rather soulful jazz club on Rush Street. It was mobbed up, but this little guy, Mo Shapiro, ran it.
Best
He had it
kind of
like
places.
he had like this one gravelly voice, hey, baby, and you had to go to Mo's house to get your money. It was it was like a sitcom. So anyway, she met Judy, and Judy, I think she actually sat in with Judy, and she told Judy that she wanted, she what she wanted to do. She wanted to try to maybe get back and get a band together. At the same time, she had met a guy named Ricky Canoff, who was in a band years ago that you may or may not heard of, called The Flock, and they were like a really popular Chicago. Well, actually, they were a very innovative band. They had a three-piece horn section. Ricky played saxophone, and she somehow met him too. And he, out of the blue, called me and said, "Yeah, I got this girl, Laurel Massey, used to be a Manhattan transfer." And I thought, "What are you talking about? It's nonsense." But then what happened was Judy, I had already been working with Judy's boyfriend at the time, Tom. Judy said, "Hey, you guys should." She wanted a quartet behind her, sax and trio, um, to make it a little easier for herself, so she didn't have to do all. She would have people that can solo and take up time.
Mhm.
And so Tom uh, called me, and so Laurel came over to the house, and we just played. She had some. I don't know. She had some music, but we just played some songs, and then we just Judy helped her get into some of the clubs, and she had kind of a name. And then she started, so right away she got some press, local press, from some of the big wigs, Larry Cart and Neil Tesser, and because she was great. And we were playing fun stuff. She was doing that vocalese stuff and just burning it. And
Mm,
of course,
okay.
Mo Shapiro at the back room, baby, you sound good, but no ballads, no ballads in my room.
Somebody was telling me about that.
No
Yeah,
ballads.
no ballads.
Yeah, and
That's hysterical.
yeah, the guy lived in his bathrobe. But uh, but so yeah, we worked the back room, then in orphans and all the different Rush, Lincoln Avenue clubs and Rush Street clubs. And then we went. Judy had a little tour that she would normally do, like Albuquerque, Phoenix, Denver, and so she told the agent that was booking all that, well, you should book this girl.
Mhm,
And so Laurel sent some stuff, and we just kind of did the same places, the Boojum Tree and the good clubs, the Sheraton Old Town in Albuquerque, the Boojum Tree and Chewy's in Phoenix. And so we we had a fair amount of work. Now we were driving all those tours, but
mhm.
you were 5 nights in a place
Yeah.
usually. And then when you had like two off, and then get to the next place. Then we did some colleges too, some weird ones. Uh, well, we did Provo, so Brigham Young was a little weird. um, but others, we did a bunch of dates, and then yeah, so that worked out really good. And then she got a manager, Joanna Fitzpatrick. I don't know if she ever talked about her,
Mm-mm.
who was interesting. And well, also we got a friend of my dad's was a Canadian band leader, and he heard us at Rick's Cafe in Chicago, and so he gave us some Canadian dates in Toronto and Ottawa, you know,
Mhm.
which was a lot of fun. This was all before we had the first record out, and then we came back. I think we recorded in '83. Uh, Alone Together was the first record we did,
Oh,
and
that
and then
that is my jam. I love that album. That
well,
album is just
it's funny you say that
oh,
because that
oh,
was our first album, and I always said, it's like
uh,
the first child to kind of break them a little.
oh
But I
my
mean, it
gosh.
had some good
That
moments.
album
Yeah,
is just sublime. I
she's
mean,
unbelievably good on it.
oh
She's
my
unbelievably good.
gosh.
Yeah.
It's just I mean, I grew up with the Manhattan Transfer. I grew up with those voices. So,
Mhm.
I can't there's never been an awareness of mine where Laurel hasn't been a star, you know. But moving into Chicago was, I mean, obviously she had to get her name out there, but did the transfer thing was when she used that as kind of like, oh, I just left the transfer. Did that make any difference to people? Did that make it
Well,
harder or easier for you guys?
I think both. The transfer actually, I think she had her accent when while they were recording the Twilight Zone album, and
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
that really was the first album that really went into the pop, like crossed over, as we say, and then they had uh, uh, subsequent records that the Weather Report tune and all that stuff. Um, I think that the Manhattan Transfer uh, the, that probably helped to open some doors. But once you open that door, you better be good, because if you're not, people are going to be quick to be judgmental about you. And I would say that Laurel, with all the community, there was a lot of great singers in town and a lot of great musicians. I think she really, um, well, first off, she was nice. So she wasn't an ass, and but I mean, on top of that, she was pretty unassuming. She wasn't doing shtick, she wasn't doing choreography. She was just doing songs, and difficult songs, some of them. And I think everybody said, "Okay, this woman can sing." And so the name Manhattan Transfer probably helped the guys at Orphan say, "Well, geez, yeah, that maybe that'll be a thing." But she did have a following of Manhattan Transferites, as we called them, that were big fans of Manhattan Transfer that liked her the best. So we sort of had a built-in, I'm not going to say major audience, but significant audience. She would basically sell out two shows at Orphans on Lincoln Avenue. It was like 120 seats, so we could actually make some money, and the club could make some money.
mm-hmm.
When we first started out, like the back room, those clubs were not, those were like clubs. And a couple of times she was kind of depressed. I, I used to smoke cigarettes, so
Mm-hmm.
we were on a break, and also you went to like 3:30 in the morning at the back room, and so it had been a rough night. A lot of as Tom would say, a lot of hardware salesmen from Iowa, to making noise. Yeah, baby, you sound good, just like clatter, and she's trying to sing Body and Soul, and people, later, later,
Yeah,
so I'm
yeah.
outside and I'm smoking a cigarette, and she's out there and she just starts crying. So I think she's crying. It's like my cigarette was down, so I flicked my cigarette into the street, and this guy ran and grabbed the cigarette. A guy who was down on his luck.
Uh-huh.
I said, Laurel, it could always be worse. And she said, "What?"
That's
So
perspective
yet
for you.
right, to her credit, she went from being a kind of a star. I mean, big transfer. They were a big deal. Big
Mm-hmm,
big gigs and limos, and she went like back into the trenches.
mm-hmm,
She started. Our first 2 years, it wasn't all glamour.
mm-hmm,
But it was a lot of fun, and I think she enjoyed. She just said the other day she misses Chicago. She misses the community in Chicago. She went back to New York. Lived in New York after she left the Adirondacks and went back to New York City, and then now she's in Poughkeepsie,
mm-hmm,
and she seems to be like you explained what you're doing, and she's put together. She's adjunct to the university.
mm-hmm,
She does her show choirs that come through. She does stuff with them. She
mm-hmm.
sings professionally. She does some church gigs, and so she's put together her life. It hasn't all been easy for her. She was married a couple times, and sorry, Laurel, but I mean, uh, so she paid a lot of dues,
Mm-hmm.
much more so than the people who stayed in the transfer.
Mm-hmm.
And but she has a good relationship with them, and she never really had a bad relationship. Their manager, she had a bad relationship with when she left, because they always try to screw you. That's their
Right.
job. They're
Yeah.
scorpions. But with Alan and Tim and Janice and then Cheryl, um, she always she got along with them, and the thing she did with Lauren and Janice, that Ja La La. I don't know if you ever heard any of that
Mm-hmm,
stuff, but
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
really, really, really good stuff. And they came here to Chicago um, back then, about 10 years ago, and I had an intern who was a vocal major at Elmhurst College, um, but they had all attended a workshop at Western Michigan where those three had done the workshop, Lauren and Janice and Laurel. So my my intern says, I want to see this Ja La La uh, people, but it's expensive, and but I really want to see it. She didn't know I worked with Laurel,
Mm-hmm.
so I said no problem. So I took her and her two friends to see it. I mean,
Wow.
you know, and so they were like kind of knocked out. She's done a lot of funny things. I mean, the Feather and Bone record and stuff. I mean,
So where did that first album come from? I mean, in the time frame, were you guys already kind of, was she pretty much now established and had a name for herself and wanted to do the CD, or she wanted to get the CD out so that she could kind of become more of a national, international
well, you
artist
needed you
again?
needed a record. We had been working together for about a year and change now, or maybe almost 2 years, and we were very well rehearsed. We had played so much that um, we had everything except the vocal thing for Alone Together, but we all the other stuff that's on that record, we had played a lot of times. It was in the old days you would say, well, it was tight, but I mean it wasn't something where we had to go in and rehearse to do the record.
Mm.
And so we had um, actually a backer, Wally Kennett. I was only a guy who really liked Laurel's, and he was very successful. So he offered to pay for part of the record, and she got a settlement for the Manhattan transfer too. Not nearly what she should have gotten, but at least you know. So he put up a certain amount of money. It wasn't very much, and she put up, and we went in the studio media uh, studio here and started recording. Steve Yates engineered, and we started recording the record without a record deal. Judy was on Pausa Records, and Judy told the the owner of Pausa, Earl, you should sign this girl. She's going to sell a lot of records. And so we sent him. I don't think we sent him like 3 or 4 cuts, not the whole thing. And he said okay. At the same time, he signed um, Made in Brazil, which was a great Brazilian band here, and a group called Wishful Thinking out of L.A., which was Danny Garibaldi's band from Tower Power.
Oh
So
yeah.
they had like 4 new things, and basically released all the records pretty much at the same time. Ours charted on Billboard, and so it got a lot of airplay. And then that's when we went to New York and did the Blue Note and stuff, and she got some nice reviews. Yeah, Henoff, and uh, so that helped push it, somewhat. But that record, we we knew the material very well. And the only tough one was Alone Together because Bob Lazier is the one who orchestrated that. It was brilliant.
Oh my
Um,
gosh. That's
yeah,
my favorite tune
yeah, it's
off
it's
her
it's
albums. It's
yeah.
just, oh gosh, it's just
And
such a master stroke. Oh,
we used to do that. We did the song live as Alone Together, when
right.
we and, and so Bob and I we had an arrangement, but he was like he's what I call an orchestration savant. As far as tight voicing, that kind of, Singers Unlimited stuff, Gene Perling thing. And so he wrote it all out,
God
and
bless.
Laura, and then Steve and I produced it, and she just would record it. If generally she could pretty much read what was going on, but sometimes I would play it if it was something
Yeah.
really weird. but
Yeah.
she would like nail it right away. And so we would do that, malt it, bounce it, thicken it, and so it didn't take as long as I thought it was going to take. I thought it was going to take years, but
I can't imagine back in those days, where you didn't have Pro Tools or you didn't
I
have
had nothing.
digital. I
No, no,
mean, gosh,
no.
I mean, the work.
Yeah, there was no auto tune. There was none of that. And those voicings on there, as you well know, are minor second city and
Oh,
tight. So she did that, and I always loved. I like some of the Body and Soul. There's several songs on that first album that really I like. A theme for Lester Young, kind of weirdy stuff, and doodling, Uh, so that record, really served us well. And then Pausa wanted to do another one, and that was Easy Living, which did even better, of course,
mhm.
in the fine tradition of all jazz labels. Uh, our record went, I can't remember, number 6 on the Billboard Jazz charts, and they only had 22 left, and they were going out of business. so, so, so
God.
that record was hard to get because and that one came out, and they both came out in record and CD.
Mm,
So, and actually cassette tape too. That's a matter of fact. But
mm.
I like Easy Living. Actually, that's my personal favorite record of the three. I think it's just because well, I shouldn't say that. I really like Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead. I thought that she
Oh,
did
that
just like,
is that is clever.
and that was fun to record. Because that was my arrangement that we had always been doing live, and then I said, Bob, let's do it, Count Basie it, and he just went boom, and she's got that, she can do all that whistle, falsetto, so she
Yes,
can do
yeah,
the
yeah.
high trumpet.
What was once the wicked witch, ba da ba da ba da ba da, you down, sha da ba da ba da ba ding dong, the witch is dead. Witch, old witch, the wicked witch. Ding dong, the wicked witch is dead. Wake up, you sleepyhead. Rub your eyes, get out of bed. Ding dong, the wicked witch is dead.
So that one was a lot of fun. I mean, each record has its own things. The best thing about I not the thing I love about the last record is, uh, that I love that Bobby Dro tune. I've got just about everything. I like the West Side Stories. We kind of just she picked stuff that she really always wanted to do, and
Hmm.
so we did it. Um, and again, by that time, like by the last record, we hadn't been playing as much, so that was much more of a. We actually had to have one or two rehearsals to kind of. We used two different bass players. Bob Lazier wasn't available, but he wrote the vocals for "I've Got the World on a String." But so it was, each record kind of is its own little kingdom, I guess you'd say. But it was a lot of fun to produce them, and fun to play on them. And a challenge. The funny thing is with Ron, on the third record, the great Ron Dwyer was playing tenor saxophone with us, who's passed away recently. But like Michael Brecker, when he would come to Chicago, he wanted to know where Ron Dwyer was playing because they were contemporaries. Ron was at the U of I and Michael was at Indiana.
Hmm.
And but the thing with Ron is he would not overdub anything. So when we would do the song and Laurel would do a guide vocal, in some cases we would keep it if it was, but you if you said, okay, that was a great take, but we can maybe fix a little something here, no, that's not going to happen. You have to do it again because Ron said, if I overdub, I've already heard the joke, and what he was saying was he doesn't, he needs to hear it in real time. And
Hmm.
so a lot of that, the stuff with him on it, including uh, the West Side Story thing and all that was basically just live, so, you know,
How
which
many
is
how many hours would it usually take you to produce an album in the studio?
that's a good question. Um, Trying to think, studio time with all the way to mix and everything in the
Hmm.
mix.
Hmm.
I would say probably somewhere around 50 to 60, 50 to 80 hours, depending on, something like that. Um, actual recording, sometimes that would go very fast,
Hmm.
the rhythm sections and stuff. I would say an average 50 to 60 hours. Uh, some of the things we had done live, but World on a String, I mean, Lazy Afternoon, all those things we had never done live. Um, so we went, we rehearsed the rhythm section, and if we had a horn player on it, we rehearsed it, but we probably rehearsed twice for, you know, maybe 3 hours each time, and it wasn't like it was extremely difficult. You just wanted to get a handle on, you know, like something's coming. It has some funny stuff in it, and Lazy Afternoon. So uh, that was kind of we were kind of stretching harmonically and everything on that third record, being a little more, I don't know, less traditional.
Had you been in the producer role before
Oh
doing
yeah, I've
these
produced a lot
albums?
of stuff. Yeah, I've produced other artists. A lot of vocalists would come to me, and I would produce records for them. And I did a fair amount of you know, commercials production uh, in the '80s, stuff for PBS. I did a couple themes for them, live from was it something from the White House? I don't know, I can't remember. But
Mhm.
yeah, I did a lot of work in studios.
When you got into producing, what was that first gig like, and how did that progress into that kind of a life for you as a musician?
Well, I was fortunate when uh, I had already done a fair amount of recording uh, in college. Just I had friends that had studios, small studios,
Mhm.
but then I joined a band called Street Player, which was being supported by the drummer from Chicago, Danny Seraphin. So Danny,
Wow.
um, who was a great guy, great drummer, and he had a beautiful club in Schaumburg called Beginnings, and they would do. I saw Billy Joel there. He would get a lot of people in who were just starting to make it, but we would play out there a lot. But he produced three major demos for us, and uh, so that and really at the best studios in Chicago at Universal and CRC, the really top studios, which and all the demos were great. And we we briefly got signed by Jerry Moss, and of A&M, Jerry Moss, Albert and Moss, and he came out the beginning, saw us, says, "I'm signing you." So we said, "Wow, that's great," So he goes back, and we don't hear anything. About 3 weeks later, Danny calls us. He says, "I got some bad news, guys." He went back, and Herb Alpert had just signed another Chicago band called Styx. So they didn't want to sign another Chicago band. Then we got signed by a band, a smaller label called Ovation, but the timing was off by that time. But it was a very good band. It was a funk band, primarily. A really great singer, um, Edgar Augusto, singer guitar player. In fact, when Terry Kath died, Danny wanted Edgar to to be the guitar player singer in Chicago, but Pete Cetera didn't want another high voice in the band because Edgar was like a Stevie Wonder. He was a Puerto Rican kid that just was and he could really play guitar. Yeah, but we got all sorts of recording experience there. I mean, maybe like 300 hours in really top studios with top engineers, and so you learn what to look for, and you learn how to make good decisions. It's all experiential. Now, there's schools that teach recording and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
There was not much of that back in the '60s and '70s. So, but that was so and I've done I don't know how many. I call them vanity projects, which is bad because it makes them sound trite. But I've done some vanity projects for some very very good singers. And and then also I was in a band called the Dick Eastman Band, and Dick went on to become a staff songwriter for MCA. He co-wrote with Bobby Hart for Boyce and Hart for 10 years, but we also got signed to Ovation records when that band. So I like was in bands up until about 79 when then I got on this tour in LA. I came back to Chicago, met Tom, started doing the Playboy Club, that stuff, and then met Laurel. That was kind of the timeline in
And was
between where
that
I played.
rock, mostly rock and pop
Um, yeah,
genre?
leading up till there, Street Player was like a really kind of a average white band type funk band, and Dick Eastman was more like a pop band. Uh, he was a solo artist, kind of like Jackson Brownie,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
real good songwriter. Dick was great. He wrote some hits. He wrote some hits for the New Edition and Pure Prairie League. I mean, he had a pretty good track record of writing songs. So, but that was like pop. And then all of a sudden, um, like the tour thing was kind of a mixed bag of stuff. It was a very wealthy girl named Kimberly Green, whose father was a multi-millionaire, and he bought her a record deal on MCA. And so she was going to do a show. And it was a little bit, I knew her in Chicago, and she was like a very nice singer and um, pretty normal.
Mhm.
So she called me from LA and said, "Hey, Dean, I want you to put a band together. I'm going to be doing these shows at the boarding house in San Francisco, la, 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 la." And so I said, "Well, okay." I said, "Well, I'm going to bring a bass player and drummer from here, and we'll pick up 4 other players or whatever out there." When we got out there, she had gone kind of LA, if you know what I mean. And um, she had a producer and a choreographer and all, they were, and so we rehearsed. And she had 3 backup singers,
Oh my
and
gosh.
yeah, and so uh, what should have taken about 2 weeks to learn her show,
Uh-huh.
she booked Modern Music Services, which was the biggest rehearsal place in Hollywood. Cher was rehearsing there, Glenn Campbell. They had like 5 rooms, so we got to listen to all those people's bands. It took like 5.5, 6 weeks to teach them the show. The band had it down, but to teach the vocalists and Kimberly, it was so her father booked they 4-walled the boarding house. We went up, did the show. They're not reviewed very well, except the band was reviewed well, which made her mad. So and so finally, after about we did like 3 weeks there, and it was over a course about 4 or 5 months. Um, I had a meeting with her father, and who was a very nice guy, and I just told him that there was problems here, and until those problems got straightened out, she's not gonna. So he said, "Well, if she gets her things together, will you come back out and work with her?" I said, "Sure." Not really. I said, but I said, I said yes, I would. I would have. I mean, I don't think she was not talented. I just think she was um, taken advantage of by LA people. There's a lot of sharks out there, and
Mhm.
there
Mhm.
was 2 of them that were nibbling on her.
Mhm.
I don't know what she was paying them, but you know what? She paid the band fairly. She paid us 2 weeks in advance to go out there, and I drew up a contract, and I said, we get 4 weeks notice. So they paid us 4 weeks when we left. So I mean, you know, we were treated completely fairly economically.
Mhm.
And the band was actually good and it was fun and they eventually got better, but it was too late. So then I came back to town and it was, just getting stupid jobs, jobbing and then the Tom thing happened and we got the Playboy Club and then that morphed into other stuff. Did this one little Broadway show for a while.
Is
And
that kind of where your jazz era mostly started, or were you
right, it started
jazz?
with Tom. It started in like 1980, where I was going from playing pop tunes and original pop tunes and cover tunes um, to playing Ellington tunes. So, but I mean, Tom had a book um, and a real good rhythm section. Bass player and drummer. So it was not difficult at all. Plus, I've heard so many versions of these songs by great jazz artists. So and so that worked. And I would play some organ on some of these things too. So occasionally.
What was it like playing at the Playboy Club? Chicago.
It was it was amusing. Everybody was nice. Some of the bunnies sang, so they'd come up and sing a tune or something. Um, there was, it was they did a lot of business back then, still, and it was a little bit mobbed up here and there, but uh, it was like a great place to just play songs with a good Yamaha 6 foot piano, and really nobody nobody bugged you. That you might get a request here and there, but it was just play songs and that's that. So it was really a good training ground for me of playing that much.
Hmm.
And that's not all. That was 5 nights. I would work other gigs,
Hmm.
sometimes something. And also I was starting to do some commercial work during the day,
Hmm.
so I was doing a bunch of stuff. But it was a lot of yucks. And it wasn't that late. That gig didn't go that late. I think it just went to like 12:30 or something like
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
I think it was 8 to 12:30 or something. The great thing about the Playboy Club is right next, if around the street was the Bulls nightclub, which was a great nightclub, late night nightclub. So we could finish there at the Playboy Club at 12:30 and go to the Bulls, get something to eat, and listen to our friends play. Ron Dwyer would be there, and Maine Brazil was there. Judy sometimes was there. So it was kind of a because that's part of the Lincoln Avenue scene, which I'm sure Tom was very familiar with.
Hmm.
So yeah, the the Playboy Club was definitely an education. I wouldn't have wanted to made a living there, although the drummer that worked with us on most of the records, Charles McFarland, he was basically the house drummer
Wow.
in the KC Club, and then when they opened the Lake Geneva Club, he and that trio was the house band up at Lake Geneva for almost 20 years. So
Wow. Wow.
yeah, so when the gig ended, he said, "I knew it wouldn't last." After that,
Yeah, I think 20 years is a pretty good gig.
yeah, it was,
Gig.
and those guys got away with murder. I mean, they would play all the shows because they had a big showroom. So you know, like people who were up, and Jay Leno would be playing there, but he's just coming up. Bette Midler just coming up. A lot of those kind of acts, and so it was some pretty funny stuff.
So did you play there until it closed?
No, no, the Playboy Club, we left the Chicago club after about a year and change. Well, we were starting to work with Laurel.
Mm,
Um,
mhm,
and then Tom and I would sub at the Lake Geneva Club, as would Judy,
mhm.
for the guys. So we would go up there and play because we weren't working every night. We'd go up maybe 4 or 5 nights a month or something, because it's about an hour and 45-minute ride. And that club was fun. There was a tremendous amount of work in the 70s and 80s and even in the 90s. Uh, just you could work a lot, especially if you're a rhythm player, if you're a piano player or bass player.
Mhm,
So and vocalists did really. I mean, vocalists here, particularly ones who did commercials, did really well.
mhm,
Bonnie Herman, who had the Singers Unlimited.
mhm.
Um, she made more money going to her mailbox every day than like a average musician would make in a month.
Amazing. That's amazing. Those were the days.
Oh yeah, there was just they were printing money. I mean,
Yeah.
and the musicians that were doing a lot of sessions, just jingle sessions, um, they were making six figures in the 80s and 90s.
Wow.
Well, you get residuals.
Yeah.
You run
Yeah.
a TV spot 13 weeks. They're going to run it again. You get paid. If they dub it to another commercial, you get another one. And sometimes they would dub a commercial. I had one they dubbed 12 times. You know, so you get 12 checks.
Well, there's a Folgers commercial that they played that was done back in the 80s. I know you've seen it. And
Right.
they've done the same with the Budweiser commercials too.
Right.
And I remember them from when I was growing up, and I'll go, dang, those people are still getting mailbox money off this.
They are. That's what they call it too.
Crazy.
And
It's
also
amazing.
people who played on major record. Chicago was kind of a big record town in the 60s. You know, there was a lot of, you had chess records, so you had the Shylights, you had like a lot of, you know, the Buckinghams, all these bands, and like Etta James recorded At Last, okay?
Mhm.
Well, I knew, well, everybody who played on At Last is dead now, unfortunately, but Freddie Runquist, who was the guitar player on it, was a good friend of my father's. And so Freddie lived until about, I don't know, maybe 6 years ago. And and he would come to, we had a senior party. I said, Fred, well, you know, what have you made in new use on At Last? He said, oh, about $90,000. So he left the union emergency fund $20,000. So that was, you know, and there was like probably 25 musicians on that session. So anytime you see It Last in a movie or in a commercial, and those people's estates now get that money. That
Well, I
doesn't
was about
stop.
to say, the laws have changed, and there's very little, um, what do they call that? Where it outlives its
Oh yeah, public domain.
contract,
Yeah,
and then it's
yeah.
just like, oh well, it's free now, free in public domain. We
Well, the
we
song might be free, but not the recording.
Thanks to
Because
Disney, we don't have any of that anymore for sure. But if and the Gershwins are
right,
another
that just a
group
lot
of
of their stuff
people
just
who
went public.
really labored hard to make sure that the Gershwin family's music always those residuals went back to the family. I mean, as it should.
Yeah, well, the difference is that the Gershwin estate was for the copyright holders. They wrote the songs.
Hmm, hmm.
The like At Last, the money that the musicians get, it's because they played on that
On that
recording.
particular recording, yeah.
So, and that won't, as long as we know who played on what recordings, when those songs are used, the musicians or their estates get that payment. I mean, there's string players, Chicago string players. They were in the symphony, but they were doing all the chess record stuff. They made more money in residuals. I mean, you know, sometimes than with the symphony. So it's, and then of course the biggest money maker is film, the secondary markets. So the people who do film scoring,
Hmm,
primarily in LA, you know,
hmm.
the stuff that's done in the United States, that that has a really large. You generally make much more on the back end than you made for the session. You know,
Hmm,
I did one session for the TV show Fargo about,
hmm.
I don't know, 4 years ago whenever it came out, and I think I made $460 for the session, and I've made about $11,000 in residuals so
Wow.
far from secondary markets. And that's just one thing. So think of people who were doing a lot of them. You know, the problem with everything is that it is a national agreement. That means that the rules in LA are the same as the rules in Atlanta and the same as the rules in Shreveport. And we've dealt with this. People have come to me in Chicago and say, well, why can't we have our own scales for film? Because it's a national agreement. And the national agreement, um, if you're fortunate enough, like I was lucky, and because we have quite a bit of shooting things here, and they did Empire here, which is
Mhm, mhm.
there's 6 seasons of a lot of musicians on it, but hardly any of the uh, any of the soundtrack was done here. Just the live stuff, and occasionally, like for Fargo, they needed something quick. Um, so, but usually that stuff goes to LA. Some of it was done in Philadelphia, oddly enough. But um, we have the rules. We can't make our own scales up, you know,
Mhm,
because if we do that, we're circumventing the national union. And
mhm.
the best part about being an LA studio musician is if it's done under our agreement, you do make a really good living in residuals. It's a very small, when people say, well, we're saving a lot of money. Yeah, they're saving a lot of money, but when you look at the percentage of what the film budget is for the music, it's not, you know, it's not a lot of money. It's just
Yeah,
they want all the money. You know, they
right.
want as much money as they can.
Sure.
So, um, you know, you're always better off if you can record. Now, one problem is none of the streaming companies have agreements with us because they're not music companies, they're not film companies, they're tech companies, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the problems. But they do hire, like Netflix will hire Warner or Paramount to produce something for them. If they do that, then it's under our agreement.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so you know the fact of the matter is, LA, yes, they are what I would call studio hogs. You know, they want as much work to stay there as possible. And really, they kind of cut New York out back about 8 or 9 years ago. New York used to get some of that other work. You know, the overflow doesn't happen anymore. Because the Coen Brothers, people like that, are going to Czechoslovakia. You know, or even, you know, some people say, well, why are we going to record something in London, John Williams? Because he wants the sound of that studio, and that's just a great orchestra. I mean, that's a great studio orchestra.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of problems. The AFM is the union is not agile, so they're slow to turn the boat, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But they're starting to realize that they need to become, you know, more. They need to turn the boat. You know, they need
Mm-hmm.
to come to some sort of reckoning with this problem. Now, of
Right.
course, the film companies would like secondary markets just go away. Then we'll record everything here.
Mm-hmm.
But you won't be a working musician in LA and be able to make a living just getting paid for sessions. You won't.
Right.
There's not enough money there.
Yeah.
Even if you worked 200 sessions a year, you wouldn't make enough money to really live in LA. You need that back end, you
Right.
know. Um, so it's kind of a rock and hard place thing. We're actually right now looking at building a scoring stage in Chicago. Um,
Wow.
yeah, and it's an $86 million proposal, and we will see what happens with it. So
And
because we have cine
is that
space.
being taken on by the union, or is there a
Well, we're
funding
obviously
source?
for it and promoting it, but no, it's being taken on by a 5013C, um, uh, two women and a guy, um, who are trying to raise fund. They want to bid. The stockyards used to be in Chicago, of course, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a bank there that's been, um, just it's the Stockyard Bank. It's a beautiful building, but it's not. It needs a complete do-over. So they could buy. They 15 different proposals went in, and they won. So they get the Stockyard Bank, and the lot across the street is where they will build this soundstage, and they will renovate the Stockyard Bank for post events and all sorts of things and community stuff. And so they got awarded. They gave it to them. They have the land. They have 3 years to do it. Now we have CineSpace, so we have 24 huge sound stages now in Chicago, indoor sound
Wow. I
stages.
did not know that.
They took over the Republic Steel plant and then converted all the big places into sound stages. So Empire was shot there, Chicago PD, Chicago Fire, all those shows are shot there, Chicago MD. And so, but if we build this stage, if we get scoring, still going to have to be the same. It's going to be the same price as it is in LA. Now
Mm-hmm.
we do have Chicago Symphony here, which is some
Mm-hmm.
pretty good players.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so, but this they're setting it up for a nonprofit because they also want to attract schools. You know, like Orlando, Disney. I'm sure Tom knows about this. You know, the kids they take bands down there, orchestras, and they get to in the parade, but they have a sound studio and they get to go in and record easier versions of Beauty and the Beast or
Mm-hmm.
something to
Mm-hmm.
and like it's like doing a score.
Yeah.
So they're planning on promoting that big here, that schools can come in and do that. And plus, we need a big room. The symphony records at Symphony Center. It's dry and it's funny. They used to record at the Medina Temple, but they can't do that anymore. It's a casino.
Oh,
So, so the scoring stage would be a place where CSO could record, Lyric could
right.
record, Grand Park Symphony, and then of course, you know, hopefully some record production. We do. It's one composer that comes to Chicago a lot that does a lot of stuff for John Legend. He records
Oh,
here.
nice.
Yeah. So, so I mean, in a perfect world, there'd be enough work where Shreveport has stuff going in Atlanta and Chicago and LA and New York.
Mhm.
And so, that's what we hope for. I participate in national negotiations for the union.
That's amazing.
So, and then I do some things for them, because I did a lot of recording, so I kind of oversee recording stuff. I know.
So you're not limited just to your digital media role. You kind of help with all contracts across
Well,
the board.
yeah, well, I've been part of there's a team of people that do national negotiations. So we have, of course, sound recording. We're doing that right now with the labels. That negotiation's ongoing. But we have TV, film, uh, television, videotape, which is the networks, public television, and then commercials. Those are the main national agreements. So,
Yeah.
but,
How is
so
AI affecting
oh, AI is the big
that?
topic right now with our negotiation with the record labels. Not only affects us, it seriously affects them. So, um, it's a it's a it's a tricky world.
How does a musician negotiate, all of this nowadays with the streaming and
Individuals who are doing their own independent recordings, they are all eligible to get money from streaming, but the streaming companies pay such a pittance that it takes a long time to get like a real check. And when I say real, I don't mean like thousands of dollars. I mean $100. The record labels do it differently. They have a deal with the streaming companies that the stream companies have to pay them,
Mhm,
and then they, instead of parsing that out, this is for just for side musicians. I'm not talking about royalty artists.
mhm,
Okay,
mhm,
so I'm not talking about Taylor Swift. I'm talking about the people who played on Taylor Swift's recordings.
mhm, mhm.
Um, that money doesn't go to them. It goes into a big fund which supports special payments, which those guys and girls get when they do a recording for Taylor Swift. So, in other words, that money comes in from streaming, but it goes back out to the people who are doing those kind of projects. So it's kind of the easiest way to do it. It would be impossible to distribute diminutive amounts to musicians who played on tracks. I mean, it would be an administrative nightmare. So,
Mhm.
uh, this is something, I mean, I got into this, trust me, I never envisioned ever having responsibilities like this. I became a member of our board of directors in 1995 here at the union, and I kind of lost a bet. so, so I, so, so I, they asked me to oversee this electronic thing and participate in this, and I said, okay. And now 23 years later,
And
and talk about the advantages, if you're a young player and down the line you want to do this for a living, we're the only organization that advocates for a livable wage for musicians. Nobody else does. So
right.
we're pretty much it, and that's kind of our mantra. So
What is your advice for young musicians, people who are getting in the business?
well, don't quit law school, and no, you know, uh, again, to go back to what I said before, with young people, the sky is blue. I mean, they have their whole life ahead of them, and they haven't had hopefully a chance to get jaded. So I think, obviously, if you want to be successful in the business, you have to stay in the business. So, it's not going to work so much for you if you say are a vocalist. And first off, if you're any vocalist should play some piano. That's one advice that I have for vocalists. In fact, I think any musician, regardless of their instrument, should play some piano. I'm not talking about making a living playing piano, but being able, to know chord changes and to be able to pick a melody out. Um, because that especially with vocalists, that gives them a big advantage. And if they can find their keys and all those kinds of things, and they can tell the piano player E flat, whatever. I mean, it helps a lot. You have to take every opportunity you can to perform. Um, and sometimes that means you're not making a lot of money, but you really, especially as a young person, you know, some people get mad and say, "Oh, they're taking our gigs because they're out there playing for free." They're not taking our gigs. It's like saying that immigrants are taking our gigs because they're picking strawberries. That's not. It's not that. It's how else are you going to get experience? I mean, obviously in school you can get a lot of good experience, you know, but what happens when you get out of school? Then you're dropped into the abyss, you know. So you have to be somewhere where there is a viable scene. And it doesn't have to be Chicago or New York. I'm sure it could be Shreveport. You know, it could be a multitude of cities, Denver, whatever. Some place that has musicians and some sort of, you know, different performance things. Um, and I think you have to go out and do it and network. I mean, networking is so important. Being nice, you know, not being a threat or trying to steal people's gigs, you know, just being positive. And also, what I always say to young players, instrumental players in particular, they'll say, "Well, I'm coming to Chicago, and you know, I want to get into theater. I want to get into theater playing, or I want to get in this." Well, okay, there's a lot of people. The best thing you can do is find out who does that work, Google them, find out, you know, how they play and what. Take a lesson from them. Take a couple lessons from them, so they can hear you play and you can hear them play. And it's the same thing with vocalists. You know, if you come to town and you hear, you know, you want to break in the scene, find out who's out there doing it well. Like here, it would be like in Chicago, be like Paul Marinaro. I mean, there's different great singers. You see them on a gig, you say, hey, you know, could I get a lesson with you or something? That that means that's a lot more effective. You know, is making that personal contact. So, you know, I, you know, besides having to be good, because if you're not good, then there's a different problem. You know, um, I mean, and because it's a very obviously it's a very competitive business, and but I really think that networking, being good vibes, learning your craft, having a good understanding of if you're a singer or a trumpet player or whatever, still you can learn how to play piano on the internet. I mean, you can sit there and you can learn. Okay, this is how you should voice a C major seventh. You know, root position doesn't sound that good. You know, this is how you should do it, and just get some stuff under your hands so you're comfortable, and also so you can speak if you're a singer in particular, if you can speak the language of music. I mean, you are probably you're schooled and you know stuff, and you well, probably do all you can do all these things, play piano. But there's many vocalists that we've come across, and when Laura and I would do like clinics and stuff like that, even at the college level, that that had never attempted to play an instrument, you know. And then I always get the question, well, how do I learn to scat sing? Well, first off, there should be a license for that. But
And
but
that's great.
but I tell young, you know, young people, I give them a list of people to listen to. I say, listen to Clark Terry, you know, more melodic, you know, people like that. Clark Terry. Don't listen to Coltrane; it'll be too hard. I mean, you
Mhm.
know, but you know, Charlie Parker. I never tell them to listen to like I say Ella's wonderful, but don't listen to her to learn how to scat because she learned from Lester Young,
Mhm.
listening to Lester Young. I mean, so listen, you know, go back and listen to Lester Young, and you know, you know, just really good Snooky Young, and you know, listen to those people and see how they do, how what they're going to play tenderly. Okay, check out what they do on tenderly, and learn, you know, mimic what they're doing, and and then if you play a little piano and you know the changes to tenderly, you can put it all together, you know, and say, oh, okay, that's, you know, I mean, that's the only way to do it, you know.
Mhm.
You know, I did my one pet peeve is people, scat singers who just have no idea what the hell they're doing, and it's, you know, it's like a cascade of weird notes, you know, and so, you know, it's and Laurel, we've had many discussions about that. She does
Yeah,
some scatting on things, but it's things that are really concise, you know.
yeah.
Um, I mean, with Laurel, the main thing with Laurel's the first time you sing the Gershwin tune, sing the melody because that's how George wrote it. You know?
Right,
Yeah, so,
right.
you know, and that's the absolute truth. You know, you sing the melody, have some respect for the composition, and then after that, you know, you can play around a little bit, but don't forget that Cole Porter wrote that or somebody, you know, so.
Right.
That's my advice. I don't know if that's good advice or bad advice, but I mean, that's the kind of things that I tell, you know, I try to impart, you know, to young. players and vocalists.
Thank you so much for your time today, Dean.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. Nice to meet you. Say hello to Tom again, and
I will
I
do
look
it.
forward to meeting your dogs.
La